Hello, beautiful people of YouTube. Now, today, I just wanted to have a little chit chat. Let's talk about how to pick your first motorcycle if you're getting into wanting to ride. Now, there's obviously quite a lot of variety, brands, style, all that jazz. Especially when you're starting off. There's a lot of learner-friendly bikes depending on the country or state that you're living in, and obviously there's a lot of rules and whatnot in regards to what learners are able to ride and what they're not able to ride. For example, over here in Western Australia, learners are allowed to ride up to a 600cc motorcycle that has been learner approved. Yikes, talk about meddling up my words. Learner approved. But for example, something like a Yamaha R6 does not classify as a learner approved bike. There are ways to work around that, but predominantly the reasoning behind it is because the power to weight ratio. So learners are allowed to ride up to 600 depending on the power to weight ratio of the 600. Now, for example, there are ways to work around that by taking your motorcycle to the pits, or actually taking your motorcycle to a mechanic and having a restrictor put in. Now, you can have a restrictor put into an R6, so you can technically ride it as a learner approved vehicle, but that costs a lot of money and a lot of time to get organized, especially as well as a lot of paperwork to get that approved as a learner's bike. But there are do's and don'ts and wills and ways to get anything done if you have the money or have the time that you're willing to invest into doing it. But for the people who don't want to waste time, just, go out and grab a bike, you gotta ask yourself, what are you going to be using your bike for? If it's just for a general cruise on the weekend, then you can, do what you want. And I think that was a speed camera, but I don't know if I was going over or not, so I don't know if that thing flashed. I didn't see a flash, because usually it's a yellow flash. But oh well. But yeah, back to the topic at hand. If you're going to use your motorcycle for a little joyride and cruise on the weekends and whatnot, I would highly recommend not throwing too much money into, like, say, a brand new learner's bike. Because you'll end up spending more money on maintenance and all that stuff and not actually get enough use out of it. And most people tend to just get a learner's bike and then, don't even follow through to get their bigger class bike because they can't be bothered. It's just a little novelty thing. But if you're wanting to get a motorcycle as like a way to commute from school, uni, work, whatever the scenario might be, then I would recommend putting a little bit of money into getting, I would say, a little newer bike, but nothing too fancy. Now, the reason I say nothing too fancy, because you're learning how to ride. You're gonna have accidents, you're gonna have mishaps. It's a matter of when you drop the bike, not if you drop the bike. So, if you drop the bike when you're on, say, a second-hand, not even a brand new learner's bike. I mean, just generally learner's bike, and as a general thing, is pretty cheap to get fixed and repaired. Because I know when I started off, I had a Hyosung GT250, and yeah, I dropped that, I'd say, a handful of times. And the most I might have spent on repairs for that bike is about $70 for a new set of mirrors or a new clutch lever or a brake lever. Now the good thing with the slightly older bikes, especially the completely analog ones, they're built like a brick shithouse. You can abuse and abuse those things and they'll keep chugging on like a champion. And that was the case with my Hyosung. So you got to do a little bit of research. You don't want to go too new, because a lot of the really new bikes have too much technology in it, and slight little dings and drops and stuff that happens when you're learning will mess up with the calibrations and mess up with the computer, and it'll cost you more. In my opinion, is it worth getting a new bike? Yes, because even though you are gonna, well, drop the damn thing, the newer bikes have a lot of newer tech, ABS, traction control, all that kind of stuff that you can use when you're learning. That's very helpful, and if you make a mistake, those things act like a safety net and help you learn. And if you do make a mistake, it's not unrecoverable, essentially. Now if you do go analog and old school, there is that thing of you gotta pay attention to what you're doing, because without that safety stuff, you're gonna likely do things like locking up your brakes, not stalling, losing traction by, you know, not being in the right gear when you're driving along, and things such as that. Now if I can find a picture of my old Hyosung, I'll definitely put it up on the video for everyone to see. But yeah, my Hyosung I would say would be one of the better bikes to start off learning how to ride, because it was legit cheap to fix anything on it, and good to learn, because everything was made so much on a budget. It was cheap stuff, but when you're learning, that is always good stuff, because once you learn how to handle yourself on the bike and handle the bike and get, you know, more experience actually behind the handlebars, you're less likely to make mistakes. And obviously the fact that in WA and Western Australia there's 2 classifications for licensing, that in itself proves the point. You need to be more experienced before you're allowed to handle a more powerful vehicle. Because yes, the more powerful vehicles have, bikes have rider aids and stuff to help you, you know, from stuffing up. But at the end of the day, if you know the basics, like I went over in my previous video, you'll be fine, because the skills are pretty much applicable across the board. Now, I wasn't in very much of a hurry to upgrade from the Hyosung to essentially a bigger CC bike, even after I took my open class test, which is my, open class license, which allows me to ride anything. I went for my Hyosungs to a CBR 500, mainly due to the fact that I couldn't find a nice bike that I actually genuinely liked at the time, because the market was, you know, not that great. There weren't that many bikes around for sale. So I bought a CBR 500 off a friend, and turns out that little thing is quite zippy, and it pretty much did everything I needed it to do. And yeah, I kept that for a year, and that's only after I had gotten my open class license for a couple of months that I actually found my R6. And the cool thing was, going from my Hyosungs to a Honda, there was quite a lot of riding aids that were on the Honda, like ABS, dynamic ABS, traction control, all that stuff. It was, yeah, it was quite cool. because I got used to the rider aids and whatnot, but then I lost all of it when I had to go to the R6, because the R6 at the time was pretty much analog, because I believe it was a 2009 or 2010 R6, so everything was all analog. So jumping between analog and tech is actually really cool, because you get a taste of both worlds essentially. And from that I was just like, alright, cool, I need to find me a bike that has the best of both worlds, which is then when I got myself the 899 Panigale. It had quite a few of the things I was looking for when it came to the safety side of things. Yeah, I mean, it comes down to the end of the day as what do you want to do with the bike? What are you trying to achieve? If it's a daily commuter, cool. Spend a little bit of money, get a newer bike, but keep to it for a bit until you get onto your open class. Don't just, okay, cool, I got myself a 250 or a 300 and then boom, upgrade within your same class. I'd say stick to one bike, do your big bike test, and then actually genuinely start looking for bikes that you really want, and that's when you can actually, you know, spend a little of that extra cash, because usually your bikes at the higher CC will be the ones that you're generally going to keep for a while. So honestly, my opinion, if you're gonna start riding, look for a 250 or a 300, preferably secondhand, with a couple of thousand kilometers on it. Like nothing too incredibly large, like 50 to 60,000. I'd say look for an older bike, analog, get used to the bike, or get used to the analog feeling, with the kilometer range anywhere between 20, upwards of 20, but definitely no more than, say, 40. Also depending on how old the bike is. And generally when you do go to see these bikes, especially if you buy them second-hand, not from a dealership, there's a couple of things you can check for to make sure that the bike hasn't been abused. But if y'all want to know what that is, or how I check to see if bikes are worth it or not, if they've been abused when I picked mine up, I can definitely do a separate video going over all those things. But for the meantime, yeah, definitely start off with an analog bike. But at the end of the day, the way you pick your bike is just completely dependent on what your style is, what you like, what appeals to you. Because you could definitely go for a race bike, naked bike, cruiser, cafe racer. Those are all the different categories of bikes you could go for. But if you're going to be setting your big bike tax on your own vehicle, then I would probably not recommend going for a race bike or a cafe racer as such, because a lot of the times in the tests, especially when you have to do a U-turn within your lane, the turning radius on a race bike at slow speeds, you're likely going to fail that test because it's not going to turn and you'll get marked down 100%. So a naked bike would probably be a good place to start, because naked bikes at slow speeds, you literally have the whole of very, very wide turning radius, which is good, especially for doing slow maneuvers as such. But yeah, if I think up of anything else, I'll definitely pop it in the description, but for the time being, I think I'll leave it there.